Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Piro. I'm the superintendent for Pittsford Schools and want to first thank you for joining us this afternoon to discuss our current plans for the 2020-2021 school year. Before we get started, I would also like to thank those that are on the panel with me this afternoon and like to begin with Dwayne Serbone to give a brief introduction.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. On behalf of PDTA as president, I'm proud to be able to serve in this capacity. As part of my work today, I'll be facilitating the meeting partially through the Q&A forum. All questions for this process will go through the Microsoft forms that were sent out yesterday. At this point, though, I want to let you know we have approximately 140 questions. Thank you. But in regards to responding to all those, we're going to do our best to get to those today. Those that we don't make it to will inform our decisions and our work moving forward, both through our subcommittee and the documentation that we put out into shared documents. I will also do my best to try to focus on questions that have not been already addressed through the conversations that happen. Thank you very much.
Melanie?
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We look forward to being able to share with you our best thinking from some really hard work that's been put together for students and staff this coming year. So thanks for your time.
And Sean?
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Sean Clark, president of the Pittsford District Administrators Association. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Leone, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, and happy to be here with my colleagues to hopefully help answer some questions as we move forward in this really unprecedented time. So thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. There's a few different messages I'd like to start out with. One is that we certainly have the logistical part of what opening schools would be like. We have the guidance that we have to follow. We have a lot of steps that we have to take in order to physically open school. Equally or more important to all of that is our emotional state as we think about opening schools and what that's like. We haven't been together since March, and it's pretty sad to say. It's pretty sad state of the state right now where we're all wearing masks. So I would ask for you to just do your best to shift your mindset now and moving forward, and understanding that this is not an issue that Pittsford is tackling by ourselves. It's an issue that every country in the world is facing. So our entire country and beyond are dealing with what do schools look like and what does our life look like right now. We're working really, really hard on this topic as far as what does school look like for us. And part of thinking through all of our plans, it's critical to understand that what we're sharing with you today is designed to be temporary. And I think that if we can get our minds in this, that what we're ideally talking about is a plan for students and staff and families in our community and beyond to figure out how to open schools safely and to maximize in-person learning between now and mid-year. So our fingers are crossed that that comes second semester or before or shortly after, that we're not dealing with the issues that we're dealing with right now as it relates to the pandemic. That means that we all have to have a sense of patience, and we have to be more flexible now than we ever have. As a district, we fall back on our core values in good times and in bad times. And one of the core values that I'm certainly most proud of is our value around having supportive relationships for all, which brings me to the acronym of TEAM, Together Everyone Achieves More. We all will be well served and best served if we can operate as a team and not as individuals. And by that, I mean, we can't operate as individual departments or an individual person within a department. We can't operate as an individual parent. We can't operate as an individual administrator. We all need to be working towards working together in order to maximize how we get through this in a productive and healthy way. I'm going to go back to a word. You've seen this on the screen twice now. The word is temporary. We're going to get through this. I don't have any doubts at all that what we're about to share, while we've worked with amazing people and I think we have an amazing plan, that we'll come back to more of our typical setting. And hopefully that's within this school year. So just to give you a brief history here, bringing us back to just a couple of weeks ago on July 13th, Governor Cuomo announced that school districts in New York can follow plans to reopen for in-person schooling in September if our infection rates stay at 5% or lower in any given region. In many of my conversations, actually in all my conversations as recently as yesterday with Dr. Mendoza, the infection rates in our county have been extremely low. And he attributes that low rate to people following directions around personal hygiene, respiratory hygiene, hand washing, social distancing, and wearing masks. The rates are in a real good spot right now. We are in phase 4 in our area. If the rates stay under 5%, then we will have the green light to open. If daily infection rates exceed 9% over a 7-day average, post September 1st, schools would not reopen. So in other words, as long as we're doing what we're doing and being responsible like we've been, there is no reason for us to not share and be prepared to reopen with students and staff. By law, we have to submit this Friday an in-person plan, which means how we plan to operate in a safe manner with students coming into our buildings and staff coming into our buildings. We have to share a remote plan, which means that students are learning from home. They are not entering our buildings. And that's the scenario where we focus on the essential learning, and students remain in their office, their house, etc., but they're not coming in. And then we have to submit a hybrid plan. And a hybrid plan is a combination of the two, meaning students are with us part of the time and they're home learning remotely part of the time. The work that we've been doing has been primarily comprised of the following people, and just want to offer a special thank you to our parents and our teachers and our administrators that have given up so much time trying to process this. We've met for several half days. We've met for several morning meetings. We've compiled and studied recommendations from CDC, from AAP, AFT, NICET, Department of Health. We've reviewed other people's reopening plans from other states and other countries. We've created and collected surveys from parents and also from staff. We've started the process for addressing each of the 3 scenarios that I described earlier. We continued our learning after a 2-day workshop with over 70 stakeholders and processed further and went into a lot more detail specific to each of the 3 plans and what we could do and what we were unable to do. In addition to all of this, information keeps coming in, and I think that's important. So we are continuously receiving guidance from the State Education Department, from the Department of Health, from the CDC, in addition to multiple executive orders from the governor's office. And to be clear, when you hear the word guidance, guidance doesn't mean advice. Guidance is a friendly term for it being law. And so when SED sends out guidance, that means we have to follow educational law in those areas. When the governor sends an executive order, that means that we must follow it. You may see this in bars right now, for example. I have not been to a bar, so I can't comment, but I will share with you that There's been guidance now given to bars that they have to serve meals with their drinks. And most bars don't agree with this, but they do it anyways, because if they don't, they'll have their license removed. And that's the same type of scenario that we're in. So when there's guidance from the governor or from SED or Department of Health, it's not optional for us. So we're operating under the constraints of guidance that's out there, and then clarification on the guidance, and often clarification on the clarification of the guidance. And I share that with you only to let you know that things continue to evolve. So we're not necessarily going to have all of our questions or answers to all the questions today. And sometimes answers that we give you today may look a little bit different tomorrow based on guidance that comes out. One of the things that our group has done as we look at district-wide expectations as far as opening school, and I'm going to go back to the word temporary, and then talk next about things evolving. So we want to start our opening pretty tight. We want to keep things as safe and as healthy as possible. And if numbers continue to decline, then we can loosen up and revisit many of these things. So some of the areas K-12 or the entire district that are pertinent to all of our buildings and departments are as follows. We are going to do our best, especially early on, to minimize or reduce the amount of visitors to our buildings. We're not going to start the year with assemblies. So those are the large group get-togethers that often happen in the auditorium, or we travel somewhere else on a field trip. We're going to do as much as we can virtually. We're going to start the year without lockers for students. There may be one exception, which would be at Menden Center Elementary, who does not have the similar cubbies as the other 4 elementary schools. All of us will be looking at flow of movement with students and staff. All of us will be practicing the use of hand sanitizers when walking into a classroom. Masks will play a significant role during our school day. We will have a screening protocol set for staff and students prior to getting on the bus or heading to school. And we are processing through right now the entire transportation guidance, which we are waiting for clarification at this point. But we do believe at minimum, whatever that guidance is, that we will be assigning students seats on the bus. Some specific changes from last spring, from the last time we departed. So from March until June, we all struggled at different levels in trying to find ourselves in what education means and looks like in a remote manner. We've had time since then to regroup and to look at best practices and to provide professional development and to continue studying where we need to land on this. So you're going to see changes in grading and assessments of students, how we provide feedback to students. There will be a level of accountability for attendance, both on the student side and on teacher side. And we've already made the transition from multiple platforms to essentially 3 platforms in total, relying on Seesaw for K-3. And those K-3 classrooms can also use Zoom. In grades 4 through 12, we are moving to Microsoft Office 365 Teams, and grades 4 through 12 can also use Zoom as well. One of the biggest hindrances in learning for our students when we were away was the multiple platforms that they had to contend with. Having 9 different teachers and possibly 7 different expectations or platforms made it very cumbersome. So I'm really proud of our staff for making this transition. It's going to be ultimately much more succinct and better for a lot of reasons for all of us. I want to start with our in-person options and share a little bit of what they look like, both at the K-5 level and at the secondary level. So I'm going to use the word proud. I'm so proud of the thinking that went into being able to bring in our K-5 students. All students will attend school every day, Monday through Friday each week. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday will be full days. Wednesday will be an early dismissal day for students in order to allow time for teachers and support staff members to have collaborative planning time necessary to support instruction in the social distancing model. So again, that's every day, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday are full days. Wednesday will be an early release day. One of our challenges was to look at how we could accommodate social distancing within our elementary schools, which meant we had to do a deep dive into our space. We were able to look at the square footage of every classroom and beyond. So it wasn't only classrooms that we looked at, but we looked at gymnasiums, our cafeterias, many of our large group instruction spaces, our art rooms, our music rooms. We looked at all of our rooms to determine, first, is it possible to have our students come back K through 5? Do we have the space for that to happen? And if so, what would that look like for us? So we went through all of the rooms and we looked at what 6 feet social distancing would entail. And all of our class sizes that we have now will vary a little bit, but every one will adhere to a 6 feet social distancing protocol. The way this works is actually pretty creative, and we had to get very creative because we are almost doubling the amount of space needed, which theoretically means that you almost have to double the staff that you need. So let me if I could start with first that every student will be rostered to a classroom teacher. So if I'm a first grade teacher, I will have my rostered group of, let's say, 22 students. If I'm a third grade teacher, I'll have my rostered group of third grade students that may be around 22 students. The way that will look for us in a typical way is taking our current model of often utilizing other adults in the building to support or enhance learning. If I am a third grade teacher and I have 22 students on my roster, what that may look like is I have 11 students, let's say, in front of me while I'm providing instruction. And then my other 11 students are in a room that may be next door. And in that room may be a paraprofessional or another certificated teacher. And as the teacher of record or the rostered teacher, I would be spending my time between those 2 classrooms. So students would never obviously be without supervision. I think about the pride that we have in our elementary schools being able to be highly collaborative. And often in one classroom, you may have 2 adults working together. The significant difference here is that there will be a wall in between. So typically speaking, that's how it would look for the elementary level. In some circumstances, classroom sizes may be significantly different. So certainly not all rooms are created equal. Some classroom spaces that we have throughout the district in our elementary buildings may be double or 2.5 times the size of a typical classroom. In that instance, you may have all 20 students in that classroom so long as they can be socially distanced 6 feet apart. Moving on to our high school. At the middle and high school level, we could not make an all in-person experience happen. And primarily, this came down to both staffing and space, which were constraints that we had K through 12 to begin with. I believe as we did our deep dive into this, in order to even consider doing this, just at the middle schools alone, we would have needed to hire at minimum 16 additional staff members for coverage. So where we landed with this hybrid model for grades 6-12, so that's both middle schools and both high schools, is that students will be in school in front of a teacher following their schedule on either Monday and Thursday or on Tuesday and Friday. So in other words, we will have two cohorts of students, which will allow us to use rooms creatively and maintain social distancing throughout the school day, and certainly during instructional time. When students aren't in front of a teacher, so let's look at group 1, who will attend schools on Mondays and Thursdays. Remote learning will then take place on the opposite days. So that would be Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And you can see by the visual what happens with groups 2. We have an additional third group of students that will include our English language learners and special education students in our district-based classes that will attend school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and will participate in remote learning on Wednesday. So the common denominator in this model is that all students will be learning remotely to some capacity on Wednesday only, or on Wednesdays, I'm sorry. Just want to go back here, just maybe just further explain this a little bit more. So if I'll use the analogy, if I am a math teacher and I have my students on Monday, while I'm with my students on Monday, I know I'm not going to have those students on Tuesday. So part of my Monday preparation with the students is to provide them with the work that they need to be doing on Tuesday. And in reverse on the Tuesday cohort. So when the Tuesday cohort is in front of me, I'll be talking with them about what needs to be done on Wednesday. Is there any clarification that's needed on that, anyone?
I think the only piece that I think I would add to it is the concept that through this, we're attempting to try to maintain the autonomy that a classroom teacher would have while making sure that students are getting common experiences and common expectations.
Thank you, Dwayne. Another area that's critical to making all of this work is registration. Right now, as we formulate the plans and prepare to submit them to the state on Friday, our next order of business needs to be to figure out how many students and families are selecting or electing to enroll in one program versus the other. So at the elementary school, parents will make the decision to enroll their students in either remote learning or to the in-person learning model. And at the secondary level, we await for parents to register or enroll their students in the hybrid model or the remote learning model. Aside from both of those options, parents always have had the option to homeschool students, which is a whole separate process. Starting at the end of this week, we will be sending out registration forms to families, asking for them to commit to a model by August 10th. On August 10th, we will be able to look at student enrollment by building for all 9 buildings, and that will help us with allocating classroom space, assigning teachers to a roster, assigning students to a teacher. It'll allow us to figure out how busing will work. In order for this process to be effective, we need to know who's coming to us and who's staying home. This process typically takes about 6 months. We usually begin the scheduling process in January. And by having the August 10th deadline for families to register, it brings us down to about 3 weeks. So this will be quite a lift for all of us, which brings me back to that opening slide around reminding myself and others that this is temporary. And while we want our schedules in front of us right now and understand what our positions will be, we need to be patient and we need to be flexible. Similarly, we will not know staff assignments until we know family assignments, if that makes sense. Connected to all of this is the option of remote learning. And part of this puzzle that we're trying to solve is, how do we match students with teachers that may qualify to teach remote? So whether you're teaching, the extent that you're teaching remotely or in person, in part is going to depend on the needs that we have. And we will certainly go through our standard staffing processes to see the extent teachers may be remote teaching, or maybe hybrid teaching, or maybe in-person teaching. There will be a list of FAQs that we've been generating for the last week, and want to thank Mike Leone, Dwayne, and others for helping with this FAQ, as it should answer many of the HR questions that you might have. So the remote learning option would happen at the elementary level if you do not choose the in-person, and it would happen at the secondary level if you do not choose the hybrid model. The parent, I'm sorry, the parent chooses. So we're going to do our best to match staff with those that are electing to do the remote learning. What we believe to be true at this point is that for those that choose remote learning, there will be less student choice involved. For example, if I'm a high school student and I choose the hybrid model, I can follow a schedule and more than likely be able to take a business elective, for example. If I am remote learning, we may not have a staff member available to allow for that business elective to run remotely. So our focus will start with, as we schedule the remote learning, we'll focus on graduation requirements and core area subjects, and on essential learning. So I would like to conclude by sharing that this scenario that we're in is a giant puzzle that doesn't have an infinite amount of resources. We have significant safety requirements that we have to adhere to, and we have space constraints, and we certainly have staffing constraints. Our hope is that we can provide models that allow families to be comfortable, and allow staff to be confident and comfortable in the district to come into a safe environment in order for all of us as a team to feel good about being back to school. So with that, I know we have a lot of questions, and I believe we probably have about an hour to address questions. So I'd like to open it up to questions that people are asking.
As we make the transition to the questions, I'd like to just model for a moment some of the SEL practices that we'll use in our classroom on a regular basis. You just heard a lot of information, and I guarantee you that everything that you just heard has behind it a 1 to 6 hour meeting that led to these things. So as you're processing and you have all the questions running through your head, when one word or one sentence was just said by Mike, that triggered a lot for you as you understood how does that fit into all your thoughts, all the things you've been seeing on social media, all the things that you're consuming in any type of media. So I ask you to just pause, even before we hit the Q&A, take a breath, understand that a lot of your questions we know the answers to. Some of your questions we will not know your answers to, but we are working on, and we have full confidence that we will reach an agreement and reach where we need to be before we open our doors in September. So with that, we all take our breath, and we're able to move on. Thank you. The first question is going to be addressed to Mike Leone, and the question is, who is responsible for reviewing the daily health screens of staff and students?
Thanks, Dwayne. For staff, The survey is done through our Microsoft 365 platform and broken down by building. Each principal in the building will designate a person to do a daily review to make sure that all staff has completed the survey. Human Resources will be overseeing the process. I will let you know if someone answers yes to a question, then an email is generated to Human Resources only. For students, we are finalizing how to best complete the self-screening process, and our plan is to be able to share that out around mid-August.
Thank you, Mike. Next question will be addressed to Melanie Ward. Are we able to have work centers, partner work, and small group instruction under these models?
Thank you, Dwayne. When I think about all of the challenges presented to us by this coming school year, I think once we get past the anxiety about health and safety, which is a big one, I think for a lot of our teachers, the next biggest anxiety is how do I teach in this kind of environment? And what does this model mean for what I know are best instructional practices? Because everything we're talking about relative to social distancing and whatnot feel very antithetical to best instructional practices. And I think to some extent that's true, and we're going to have to modify the way we do things in order to maintain the health and safety protocols as our primary focus. To the greatest extent possible, we're going to encourage teachers to plan for less small group instruction than they might have previously and err more on the side of larger group instruction, recognizing that at any one time, a teacher's large group will probably be smaller than what it typically would be in a given year. We would probably be looking at discouraging things like a small guided reading group of 6 children all gathered around a kidney table. That's best practice at the elementary level, but it's not best practice in these conditions. So we're going to work with teachers to think about how do I transition my thinking to plan in that way. A lot of the activities that teachers plan for kids typically to do in learning centers during the school day, they can still have children do. They just need to think about how the kids can do that and still maintain appropriate space between and amongst them.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing in that, and I caught from Melanie's response, we're not looking for people to head back to 1974.
No.
We're looking to try to maintain the best practices that we can under these current constraints.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Melanie. Next question as well will go to Melanie Ward. And the question is, will there be communication from central office and administration that academic progress may look different than previous years due to the challenges in providing best instruction in these models?
So the short answer would be yes. Of course, building and district administrators will support teachers in communicating to families how things necessarily need to look different. But just to expand on that a little bit, one of the things I'm really proud of is the amount of time that teachers have spent this summer engaged with their colleagues on looking at this instructional roadmap that we're building for next year and really thinking about those most essential pieces that need to be the cornerstone of our instruction. Keeping an eye towards making sure that all students have an opportunity to engage in rigorous learning experiences in this year's grade level curriculum. Not thinking about, I have to start this school year with 6 weeks of remediation for what kids missed last year. But how do we look at what those gaps are and build them into this year's upcoming curriculum? If we keep an eye on those most essential standards across every discipline and across every grade level, then I believe kids will have the opportunity to make appropriate progress in their current curriculum as they should. If adjustments need to be made along the way, administrators will stand behind teachers in working through that with their classes and with their families.
Great, thank you. Question will be directed to Mr. Piro. What is the process if a teacher or a student is suspected or tests positive for COVID-19?
I think that answer could take us to 4:30, to be honest. There will be specific protocol that will be shared with every teacher, paraprofessional, staff member, employee in the district, especially our school nurse teachers and school nurses. But I'll tackle the question in this way. Every Wednesday I have just about either every Monday or Wednesday, I've met with Dr. Mendoza, and we are processing protocols based on best practice from Monroe County Health and New York State Health Department. I will also share that in those scenarios, in those situations, each situation may look a little bit differently. So for example, if someone tests positive for COVID on a Saturday, it may look a little bit different than if they test positive during the week. If they were coming off a break, that may look a little bit different than if it was during a typical school week. So in the event we are having a staff member or a student test positive for COVID, I think the first thing that's critical to know is that we will automatically be linked with Monroe County Health Department. The Monroe County Health Department has my cell phone number, and will have other people's cell phone numbers within the district as backups, so that we receive timely information that someone has tested positive. This is also one of the reasons that we're doing our best to keep students to the extent possible in cohorts. It's also why attendance is critical, so that we can track students that may have been around a student or a staff member that tests positive. So having said that, in a typical, let's go to an elementary level right now, we have students, let's say in a pod of 10 classroom of 10 for the vast majority of the day. And we find out that student tests positive. More than likely, that entire class and the teacher would have to quarantine for 14 days while contact tracing is taking place. The Monroe County Health Department will be our biggest factor in determining the exact course of action. At the middle level, the same thing. There are factors that we're going to have to rely on Monroe County Health to help us with. If a student, let's say at the high school, which is a little bit more tricky, test positive for COVID, and he or she passed another student in the hall really quick, then that person is probably not as much risk as the person that may have sat across from him or her on the bus or in class for a good portion of the day. So each scenario is a little bit different. Part of this entire process for when we come back will be on training staff as to how to look for symptoms for students and within themselves as it relates to COVID. There will be protocols if you're a staff member and you suspect a student is showing symptoms. So things like the nurse will be notified. The student will go to the nurse's office and be isolated, or in a room next to the nurse's office and be isolated. Parents will be notified. Parents will pick up the student. The student will have to go to their primary or their pediatrician before they're able to return back to school. So I think in long and short, know that there's a lot of different scenarios. The protocols for each will be shared, and we will have training for all staff relative to what those protocols are, as I think that this question is probably at the core of what most of our anxiety, where most of our anxiety is coming from. Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate, as we hear about the training and whatnot, the concept of front loading those superintendent conference days on the year. So for all staff to know that that time is going to be provided for us to be able to learn these new techniques and strategies and protocols that we may not be aware of at this time. Next question is going to Mr. Clark. Will there be a choice in who works with whom in classes that are distanced into 2 rooms, and how other staff are assigned? Will all students access the certified teacher?
Thank you, Dwayne. So certainly with unique staffing situations like we're going to encounter this year, and all of us want to see our staff success, building principals will be heavily involved in the planning of staff. I see to the greatest extent possible, working with our PDTA reps, working possibly with our ILTs or ILT subgroups to look at the staffing and the implications. Again, we want to set everyone up for success. I think the superintendent did a nice job in his main presentation of outlining the access to certified teachers. So yes, students will be rostered, and each student will have access to a certified teacher. You will not find situations where special area teachers, say an art teacher, is responsible for planning and teaching mathematics or things like that.
Thank you. And next, Superintendent Piro, will there be cleaning product training for the end users? Will cleaning products actually be able to be used within the time allotted?
Part of the answer is front-loading superintendent's conference days. So we have about 4 full days together. The opening day with all of us together is certainly going to be much shorter and look much different, which will actually buy us more time to use our time differently, unfortunately. Part of that training will be on not only cleaning product training, but we'll also be on training around PPE, how we're using our masks, our expectations around masks with students, all the proper respiratory hygiene and how to communicate that. So absolutely, we will go through the training. What we're looking at right now is our schedules and the extent we're able to use our current products within a passing time period. So more to come. Know that that's on our radar. It's actually more than on our radar. It's on our agenda. And so trying to figure out if we use a product that takes 10 minutes to dry and we have 5 minutes of passing time, give or take, maybe 6 or 7, what are our options given that? I will share with you that we're committed to making sure that our classrooms are disinfected on a regular basis.
Thank you. And for Assistant Superintendent Leon, what is the process for an immunocompromised staff member requesting an alternative placement or leave?
Dwayne, I know this is a big question and one that's causing our staff and families considerable concern. As the superintendent said, we've done a frequently asked question document that we'll send out tomorrow, and which will give more detail than what I'm going to give right now. But parents do have an option that they can have their child learn remotely under the current regulations, as we talked about. For a staff member, the person will need to contact Human Resources, and we will need to go through the required process to determine if that person would qualify and can be granted the leave or accommodation. And there are some specific forms that we have developed that will help guide staff through that process. Now, we can't promise that everyone will qualify or that we will be able to meet every accommodation. But what we do promise is that we care and we will work with folks, and to the degree that we can do something that meets both what the district needs and is helpful to what the staff needs in their situation, we really seek to work together to come to those good solutions. But I know it's the question that is causing people some stress.
Thank you. Mr. Piro, will there be a way to attend building and district-wide meetings virtually?
Similar to this. Our
Feels good.
As I shared earlier, we're going to start really tight, and we're going to look at making sure that we do our best to keep our infection rate as low as possible by being as responsible as possible. By being responsible as possible, that means to avoid large group gatherings. We'll all think about how to do things differently as they relate to staff meetings. Most of what we do in large groups will have to be done remotely.
Thank you. Next question to Mr. Leone. How will the district support staff members who might need to be home with an elementary student, depending on the decisions made in other districts?
Again, certainly a question that's on people's mind. If you have a child that the daycare or school is closed for a COVID-related reason, there's something called the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act, which is a derivative of the Family Medical Leave Act, and it's a temporary pass. Anyway, under that, there are potential short-term leaves available, but they are short-term. Keep in mind, as we look at these cases, we are going to seek to balance the need to educate our students, the personal family responsibility of the staff member, and what is allowed or not allowed under the law. And so one option may be for staff to take a short-term intermittent leave to care for their child on the days that they're learning from home. What will work best is we really have to communicate about this. So we need the staff member to contact us as soon as possible, and we need to work collaboratively to work out a plan which makes sense for both the staff member and the needs of the district in supporting our students. Those are going to be individual. So again, I know that these are stress-causing questions.
If I could, Dwayne, I'd say just to add to that a little bit.
Sure, you can.
We met this morning as a steering group from 8 in the morning till 1. And within that 5-hour window, I would say we probably spent an hour on how do we accommodate staff who have kids in other districts. So specifically, I believe what this question means is we're presenting a K-5 model where our students are in person in going to our schools. We have staff members that who do not live in Pittsford. And so if I am living in basically every other place but Pittsford in this area, there's a likelihood that my children aren't going to school every day. And so if I'm a teacher in Pittsford, I live in, let's just say, Brighton. And Brighton has their elementary students in twice a week. And that leaves me conflicted because I have 3 days a week not covered by childcare. One of the things that I feel we've done an amazing job with to start has been thinking creatively, to thinking outside the box. We'll also be continuing to think outside the box relative to how we can accommodate our students and paraprofessionals that have childcare issues. We will look at every possible scenario. We'll look at what are the guidelines for us to possibly relieve some of that by opening something in our area or using a facility in the area. And that's far from a promise. It's far from a guarantee, but it's a promise that we're looking into every possible thing where we can take care of adults that are in need of assistance for childcare. It's a huge burden. It's a real burden. We need our adults here. We need them focused. We need them happy. We need them to feel safe. And to the extent possible, we want to work with the adults in our district who are in need of childcare. So there's certainly a pledge to think creatively around this topic.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Ward, can you go into a little more detail on the hybrid classroom, what it might look like? And is there an expectation that remote students are virtually joining the class?
So the hybrid model is a new frontier for us. And I said at the meeting this morning, this is the kind of thing that in normal circumstances, we would be planning for about a year's worth of professional learning to prepare for, and we have about 4 weeks now. So we know that this is going to stretch us a little bit, but here are some things we've definitely talked about. We have a responsibility and an obligation for daily attendance for our students. And so on the days when students are learning at home in the hybrid model, we do need to have a way to account for them, that they have participated, that they've attended and been engaged in learning in each class. We've talked about the fact that there's lots of different ways that that could happen. So it can happen if you have your kids doing something and completing a form on Teams. There's a date stamp on there. If you're using Delta Math, there's a way to keep track of kids using it. So there's lots of ways that we could monitor kids' engagement and attendance on the days that they're not sitting in your classroom as a teacher. So the thinking here goes kind of like this. If I'm you, Dwayne, and I have a group of students in front of me on Monday for math, I'm thinking about the most essential things that I want to do when those kids are with me in person. And before they leave me on Monday, I am giving them some instruction around what they will do while they're home on Tuesday asynchronously. They will have to check into my class in some way, whether it's completely asynchronously or whether I do a quick hello via a Zoom or something like that. But they'll have something that they're responsible for doing at home in that setting. And then on Tuesday, you'll get the other half of your kids in. You'll do probably a very similar lesson that you did with your group on Monday. So you're kind of doing that repeat and then setting those kids up for what they're going to do asynchronously the next time that they're at home. Other things we've talked about that I think we've pretty well ruled out are things like, as a teacher, you would be live streaming your class to the kids that are home. That doesn't make sense. And I've seen that kind of show up in some of the later questions being submitted. So the answer to that, I think, is pretty much no. You're not going to be expected to be responsible for 12 kids are physically in your room and 12 other kids who are in a Zoom room at the same time. That's not, that would not be good instructional practice. So kids will be with you 2 days a week. We're going to get teachers to think about what are those most important things that I need to do with kids when they're in person with me versus what are things that they can do asynchronously to keep their learning moving forward. Because what this can't result in is we only get through half the curriculum. So we're going to have to think creatively about that. And then on Wednesdays, when everybody is remote learning, we will be providing teachers with kind of a bank of best practices that they could do with their whole group on Wednesdays. That might be a day that you're actually giving kids a test, because that might not be the best use of your in-person time with them. There's a time for collaborative group work. That Wednesday will be the only time that a whole class of students will have the opportunity to be together. So we're working through some resources to support teachers in thinking about how to most effectively and efficiently use their time in person, as well as what kids can do in a meaningful way. But they will be expected to be essentially following their schedule on their home learning days.
Thank you. I appreciate you demonstrating that so much thought has been put into this. And I'm sure everyone out there is regretting that we ever committed to being lifelong learners and that we get to execute it during this time. Mr. Piro, has the district looked into purchasing shields or clear masks so that students can see the face, mouth of the teacher?
This is an example of how guidance evolves or changes. When we first saw the demonstration of masks, our inclination right off the bat was, let's order shields. Let's order shields, clear shields for all of our staff members, because it's obviously, it seems perfect. You can see people's mouths, and it's a little bit more comfortable, I believe. I can attest to that right now. And then shortly after, different guidance came out from SED and the Department of Health that talked about masks being necessary and shields not being necessary. And that if you had a shield, in order to be safe, you also needed to have a mask on. Our focus has been on ordering an ample amount of masks for all students and all staff, having them additional masks ready to go on buses and classrooms, etc. We have still ordered shields, the clear shields, for students, for teachers of students with that require speech. Many of our teachers that have students with special needs, they have shields, and then we are going to have a bank of shields for others that should they request to have them.
Thank you. We will be making sure that not everyone is forced to wear the Buffalo Bills, but will represent across the board.
We will have to negotiate that.
Next question will go to Mr. Piro and Mr. Leone. Many of our schools are anticipating a shortage in teacher subs. What will the process look like if we see a significant shortage in finding substitute teachers and other support staff?
I don't know the answer, so I'm looking
Yeah.
at you.
I don't know that I know the answer but substitutes will be a challenge. There's no doubt about that, but there is some good news. I am happy that a majority of our substitutes have already committed to the fact that they're still interested in subbing in the upcoming school year. But I will say the pool is smaller than normal. Clearly, we're going to all need to be part of the solution. However, I will say teacher substitute shortages have been a nationwide issue for the last several years, and some of the creative solutions that we put in place should continue to help us. And also, we're right now looking at some other potential temporary solutions, which aren't perfect, but would help in the short term. So as we know with subs and whatnot, that the spring tends to be more challenging than the fall because of the additional responsibilities that we have to do. So depending on where we are, the magnitude of the issue, if we're back in school, may not be as much.
Thank you. Mr. Piro, staff are concerned about lack of ventilation in certain rooms, especially those that may not have windows. What would be the procedure for identifying and fixing this if needed?
Thanks, Dwayne. I'd like to start out just by talking about ventilation for a second. One of our big drives during our capital projects has been to look at all of our air handling units and replacing air handling units, replacing our HVAC system, our furnaces. We exceed in the vast majority of our buildings. We exceed what the state requirement is for ventilation and turnover of air. So in a typical classroom, so I'll start with a typical classroom, we have more than a 20% turnover of outside air being mixed in on a regular rate. So we're above what's required from SED through this COVID crisis, in part because almost everything has been replaced. In the event that a teacher or anyone feels that they are in a room with inadequate ventilation, that should be an email or a phone call or a walk down to the principal's office. And that way the principal can connect with district office staff such as Darren Kenny or Jeff Beardsley, so we can bring the right people in to test the flow and turnover of air and ventilation. We'll also talk about how to maximize the amount of ventilation in a classroom, which would involve windows. So that is an important concept. Even in a regular classroom, we would probably be requesting the teachers, to the extent possible, keep the windows open. And there's some other things that we're looking into to see if that would be a best practice. Sometimes we want to allow for one thing to happen, but it conflicts with a different law. So some of the things we're trying to figure out is how do we maximize ventilation without breaking fire code or worrying about intruders or some of the things we haven't had to worry about in a long time. So more to come there.
Thank you. And knowing that it would be appropriate to inform an administrator of that immediately so that we can begin working on that is appreciated. And just as a word for all, a hot room would not indicate a lack of ventilation. When you mix hot outside air with hot inside air, you get hot mixed air. So it's not temperature we're looking at, it's exchange of fresh air, meaning fresh outside air, no matter what the temperature. So thank you. Next question as well will go to Mr. Piro. And it's what considerations are being made in the early weeks when the heat index may be very high and the students will be wearing masks and other uncomfortable scenarios?
Our conversations during our steering meeting today were around the use of masks and how they're critical in our plan to keep people safe. But at the same time, we need to look at how we can maximize mask breaks for students during the course of the day, especially during the hot days. We have, through Monroe County Health Department, guidance as it relates to wind chill. And if the wind chill is this high or this low, that we should probably close schools. This is another area where we would rely on Monroe County Department of Health to give us guidance with that additional layer now of having students and staff wear masks in the summer.
Thank you. To Mr. Leone, how will the district ensure adequate custodial staffing to maintain disinfecting protocols?
Well, again, we will continue to recruit for and make sure we maintain our custodial staff. We are very fortunate because we have a number of long-serving custodial staff members who are very familiar with our buildings and very much part of our overall learning community. So we'll continue to recruit and do the work to make sure that when openings occur, they get filled. Also, and in talking with Darren Kenny and Jeff Beardsley, who head up this area, there's also the idea of making sure that our custodial staff have the training and equipment to do the work. And with that, the district has already done quite a bit. So starting in March, we went to hospital grade disinfectants, and then we just purchased a good deal of equipment that helps make disinfecting quicker and I guess more efficient. So again, it's not only about just making sure we keep those openings filled, but that we're giving our folks the training and equipment that they need. And I can tell you that Darren and Jeff have been, very proactive on doing that.
Thank you. And next to Mr. Clark, when will it be appropriate for staff to break the 6-foot barrier, i.e. during instruction, student in distress, one-to-one situations?
There, okay, now we've got the sound. I think we always want to start by reminding our staff that it's their good judgment and professional thinking that goes into almost every situation that they deal with. I don't think anyone would say that it would be appropriate or expected that a kindergartner falls down and gets hurt and we have to maintain 6 feet of distancing. However, having that 6-foot barrier, I think, is important to the greatest extent possible. If that proximity closes, making sure that people are wearing their PPE and being very smart about what that proximity looks like and how they're engaging with kids, I think is very important. Also, for specific students, there might be a specific plan that's in place to address proximity as needed. And in situations, I would say if staff or teachers are uncomfortable, then it's simply picking up the phone or calling for administrative help and then kind of relieving themselves of that responsibility. But it's hard to say with each and every situation exactly what it'll look like. So it's good judgment. It's asking for help when you need it. It's using the PPE. I think that's going to be important in those situations.
Thank you, Sean. And Mr. Piro, will there be any regular COVID testing of students or staff?
As we submit our plans or prepare to submit our plans this Friday, any kind of routine COVID testing will not be included in those plans. The things that would change that would be if there were an executive order from the governor's office, for example. But right now, we have no plans on regularly testing with the traditional COVID test. What we do plan on implementing on a daily basis, which is by law, are all of the pre-screening tools that are just going to be a good practice. For example, all students and staff will need to take their temperature before they either enter school or enter the bus in the morning. We're going to do everything that we can to look at training staff with how to identify symptoms, and then getting in that routine with families and staff, the importance of pre-screening.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to transfer to some questions that we have not had the opportunity to process and to delegate out. So I wish everyone at the table well. And please be the first to take the question, especially if it's a hard one. We'll start with a fairly easy one, hopefully. How will the copier be used? Will there be a way to clean it between users?
Yes. We
Thank you.
began, as we looked at our reentry plan coming in over the summer, we created building-wide protocols for use of copiers and printers. So we will have at the copier and printer appropriate disinfectants to use after use, so that the next person that comes in will be able to have a disinfected printer or copier. We'll also look at protocols for social distancing, wearing a mask if we're in line for copiers or printers. So all of those will certainly be in place. And if I could, Dwayne, one of the things that we can't let happen this year is to have 9 different buildings have 9 different levels of protocol. And so we'll be taking that over to make sure that regardless of the building that you work in, or if I'm a student, regardless of the building that I'm learning in, we're going to have the same expectations relative to general disinfecting, amongst other things.
Thank you very much. Within that, we have that concept of individuals using sanitation on their own, so hand washing and hand sanitizer on a regular basis, so we know that those will be available as well. So thank you. Do students with IEPs still attend the same at school and home learning model at all levels K-12?
So I would say for the most part at this point, yes, a student with an IEP would attend the same model that their general education peers would attend. Currently at the 612 level, for the hybrid model, we have identified that we will be inviting students who are in our self-contained district-based classes to attend school in person 4 days a week, rather than the 2 days a week that the rest of the student population will attend. They are some of our most vulnerable at-risk learners, and they need more direct instruction from a teacher. As we look at space constraints and staffing constraints, there may be some consideration for accommodating additional students with IEPs back in the building on a more frequent basis, but we're starting with just those students in our 12-1-1, 8-1-1, and 12-1-3-1 programs to be in school 4 days a week.
Thank you. And I'll point out to the listeners that a few times you've heard we will start with, and it captures that concept of what Mike detailed, which is we'll start tight on things and then loosen up or open up as able by both the environment and the facility usage and the staffing that we have. Next question is regarding socialization, and it specifically addresses, has there been consideration to the 6th and 9th graders who are transitioning from one building to another without the typical supports that would be in place?
So for 6th graders and 9th graders who typically come in and do a 6th grade orientation and a 9th grade orientation in very large groups using our web and our link programs, the middle schools and the high schools are developing a modified experience so that kids will be able to come in smaller groups and then be parsed down into even smaller groups. they have a very basic level orientation to their buildings in each place. So it will not look like the full web program or link program that we're accustomed to, but we are still making sure that those kids have a little bit of a taste and a chance to at least get a tour of the building and some other basics in some very small group, masked, socially distanced ways.
Thank you. It's probably, we're deep enough into this right now. We should probably throw out the word temporary, just to get that word back out there again, as Mike's been using it. Things aren't going to look the way they normally look, but it will be temporary. Next question is, how will special area staff be protected since they do not work with just one cohort of students, but could possibly work with over 400 students?
You want to start?
Sure.
I'll go from there.
So all of our teachers, the whole idea behind these temporary learning models that we have is to set up protections for teachers, students, and all staff members. And that would be the same. Now, some teachers are going to be working more with one cohort of kids, but even teachers that would normally work with one classroom, let's say at the elementary level, that class might be housed in two different locations, so they're going to the different areas. Our special area teachers, part of the plan is to really streamline what happens and how many kids are being worked with overall. But again, the protocols in place, that's the primary thing that we're looking to do. That's why we're doing these temporary learning models.
Dwayne, I would add that this is a situation that we need everyone's support and we need everyone's help in making our environment as safe as possible. And that's why we need to be very vigilant around students wearing masks, our mask process and policy, our hand hygiene, our respiratory hygiene. We need to create as safe of an environment as possible. And that goes for staff interactions with staff interactions with student interactions, and vice versa. This probably isn't a great answer, but we're in a pandemic where there's always going to be a level of risk. And what we need to do, and which is what we are doing, is we're taking hours and hours and hours and hours of our collaborative planning time this summer to do everything that we can to mitigate as much risk as possible. And unfortunately, there's no way to totally remove all risk, but we are committed to creating as safe an environment for all staff as possible.
Thank you. Recognizing all that work over the summer, to be appropriate to thank all those who are working incredibly hard this summer, addressing things that would have never been addressed before. And that would be across all units, our custodial staff that are attacking things right in the buildings, administrative staff, teachers, paras, SRPs in all ways. So thank you for engaging in more summer work than you ever would have thought of in a normal summer. But this is not normal. So thank you. Next question. If extracurriculars cannot meet in person or after school, can we run them virtually?
So we will not have extracurriculars to start the year. We'll make the choice on that as we move forward. And what we'll do is the choice may be around, if we were to do extracurriculars and we had to limit it, how would we limit it? And it would probably be to those that we feel would be very important for, say, the very traditional school things, like let's say yearbook or something like that, just as an example. But we're starting out the school year with no extracurricular activities.
So again, we hear that we are starting in this manner and we'll be revisiting as we move forward. Thank you. Next question, will athletics be running this fall?
So I get to be full of good news, right? Athletics will not be starting with the start of the school year. The New York State Athletic Association has put into place some potentially different plans, which could be modified seasons. However, those would need to be approved by the governor, and they have not been approved at this point. So again, same thing. We're starting the year without athletics. It is the hope that there will be athletics, and what we'll need to determine once the governor tells us is will it be modified seasons? And the other thing we don't know is, will it be every sport or only sports that are considered lower risk?
Dwayne, I believe that there is a date, I think it's September 21st, right around that time frame, where the governor will be making a decision about sports, at least for the fall season.
Thank you. For all listening, I'm doing my best to try to group questions together on the fly. So hopefully you're probably not going to hear your exact question, but it's being grouped together in some manner. Next one has two parts. It's what are the expectations for grading and assessment? Can you please tie this into the concept of academic integrity?
It's my pleasure to say, Melanie.
So unlike when we went to emergency remote learning this past spring and we really put the brakes on formal assessments and grading and assessments will return as we know them to the greatest extent possible in all of our models this year, including if we are shut down and go fully remote. So we do expect that students will be engaged in assessments, formative assessments, feedback frequently, summative assessments. We expect that student work will be graded in keeping with our PCSD grading philosophy. We expect that report cards will be issued as usual at both the elementary and the secondary level. And in terms of the academic integrity piece, I think that we have a couple of things that we want to talk about there relative to if kids are going to be doing an assessment at home, making sure that potentially they sign an honesty statement prior to tackling that particular assessment or having an overarching academic integrity statement that students sign off on. But I think beyond that, and this may be an opportunity for us to think about the use of non-traditional assessments, ones that would be much less likely for students to be able to be dishonest about their own work. So things that are perhaps away from a traditional paper and pencil, forced choice kind of assessment, so that we're really getting at authentic work from our students. So I guess the short answer is assessments and grading come back into our repertoire this year, no matter what learning environment we're operating in.
Thank you. What criteria is PCSD using to determine if or when the school will close and go into a remote model?
That's a good question. We will look to Monroe County Health to make the determination if a school should close. And sometimes it may be that a region closes. If we get beyond 9% infection rate, then more than likely our entire region will close down. Closing a school in large part will be the call of Monroe County Health Department. We will certainly look to things internally, like what is our own attendance rate? Are there concerns with significant concerns like we normally have with the flu season? What do we have teachers to be in front of kids? Are our kids testing positive for COVID? At what rate is that happening? We may be in positions to shut down a building and not the district. We may have to shut down the district. We may have to shut down the region. This will not be done in isolation by any means. This will be done in consultation with Dr. Mendoza.
What will be done for a student who refuses to wear their mask?
I don't think we've gotten into the details of that yet. We have had conversations around, is this something that goes into our code of conduct? The expectation, as we left our conversation this morning, is that we have to rely on one another to keep our buildings healthy and safe. And we can't condone people that aren't keeping us healthy and safe. So having said that, if I were to take a step back and put myself in the shoes of a 11th grader or a 9th grader or a 7th grader, this is going to be annoying for a while. And so I would hope that my teacher would provide opportunities for me to do this. It's at various points during a class to take a mask break. But the expectation is that just like a classroom environment, it's the teacher's, one of the teacher's roles is to create an environment with expectations that students adhere to. And when they don't, then there is a consequence. We have not gone into what that consequence would look like.
Thank you. If a student chooses the virtual model, not coming to school, will they be assigned to any teacher who teaches that course across the district?
So this is why it's critical to have that now I'm getting into a bad habit. This is why it's critical to get into the registration process and the entire process with staff that may be immunocompromised or whatever the case is. We need to see how many staff are going to be home, or how many students are going to be home requesting virtual or remote. And then what is the pool of teachers that we have to allow for that matching of students? The quick answer is yes to that concept. We're going to do our best to make it a match that makes sense. But the students that choose remote or virtual, again, are probably going to have significantly less options because of the breadth of our program. So our primary focus will be on graduation requirements. And if, let's say, it's English 11, then ideally we would have an English, someone that in district that teaches English 11 and be able to pair a cohort with him or her.
Thank you. What is being put in place for the students' SEL needs following an extended absence from the buildings?
Well, I would start out, and then Melanie, if you could just take it over. How we open school is going to be critical. Our expectations that we have around students needs to be about reacclimating to the environment. We have to have an understanding that the start of school is not going to be about content. It's going to have to be more about building relationships, connecting with one another as colleagues, connecting with one another as teacher learner. We need to be able to process in a safe way a lot of what students have been exposed to during their absences. So this is a question that's not just about COVID. Our students to different levels are going to come to us with different levels of trauma, either related to all of the things that we see on the news that are of significance, the concerns around race, how people are perceiving what they're seeing around protests. We have students that have, in typical form, different levels of supervision and environments at home. We have learning gaps that we're going to have to address where students may come in more frustrated. We have a higher level of anxiety than ever before for students that are coming to us. So there will be specific best practices for staff to follow. But I think that if staff could just remember why you went into education and try to magnify that feeling of wanting to make a difference. And I think that SEL part is going to be wanting to make the difference in helping students feel good and comfortable and safe in their learning environment. And once they're there, then we begin down the road of increasing levels of rigor and expectations for our students.
So the only thing I would add to that, yes, everything that Mike just said. And as we've done the road mapping work this summer, we've talked a lot about the need to make time for those things. So everything that the superintendent just talked about, building time into every classroom to establish that supportive culture and climate and those relationships. Never been more important to take time to do that. That's time. So that goes back to, what are we not going to do? What can we agree that we're taking off of our plates? Because if we don't take care of our kids' social, emotional needs, we can't optimize their academic learning. We have talked specifically about things like using some extended homeroom time at the secondary level for community circles to build relationships. Our counseling staff has been hard at work developing consistent lessons across the K-5 buildings at every grade level to work with students on re-entry and transition and anxiety and mask wearing and those kinds of things. Our entire social, emotional, mental health team has been working really hard all summer to develop specific supportive strategies for teachers and students, because we know it's not just about our kids' social, emotional health and well-being, it's about our staff members' social, emotional health and well-being and how we're taking care of each other as well. So it's very much on the forefront of all of our planning.
Thank you both. I think we'll take one more question in order to allow a few moments of closing comments by the superintendent. Final question will be, given all of the risk concerns, why are we not going to remote learning at this time?
The first thing that we felt as a committee, and I really have to appreciate people's thinking around this, is that our youngest learners are better served in a lot of our minds being in front of a teacher. The second that we say we're going all remote at the elementary level, for example, is when we have to again go back and acknowledge the fact that we can't control the environment that the students are in. We're coming off of 5.5 months of students not being in front of teachers, and we feel that we have a plan to certainly mitigate that risk, and that outweighs keeping students at home and learning remotely. It was really tough to connect with students on an emotional and intellectual level, given our lack of preparedness to no fault of our own when we closed in March. The other thing that I would share is that there's certainly varying levels of risk with especially our youngest learners, K-5 students. A lot of information that would show that they are less likely to spread COVID. They're less likely to be impacted by it. But having said that, the risk is never zero. And so given all of that, we felt that we owe it to our youngest learners to bring them in and to create as safe an environment as possible, and hold everyone accountable for that safe environment.
That'll close our Q&A portion for now, and we'll just conclude the meeting.
So I guess I would just close by saying this is a start. We have started the dialogue with staff. Tomorrow night we'll start the dialogue with our community, and in all the messages that you'll hear from me, it's going to be about having to work together. Things are going to evolve without question. Things that we're going to do to start out the year will more than likely change. We also have to be ready to pivot at moment's notice. And so while we're looking at these three options currently, we also have to look at a worst case scenario as well, which is what happens if our schools are closed, and how do we pivot from going from a hybrid model, for example, to an entire district going remote learning. You're going to have information overload. So part of what we're trying to prevent is from that happening. We have a lot of information to share, and we want to use that information or convey that information in small digestible chunks. And instead of having your emails be hit with 8 attachments, I think that this type of dialogue is something that is helpful for us to hear what's on your mind. But I'm also hoping that it's helpful for you to try to frame what it's going to be like when we come back. I can't tell you enough how much you're missed, how much normalcy is missed. But we've been in the buildings every day pretty much this summer, and it's still hard to get over walking by classrooms without students, without seeing all of your faces. And I have to do my own self-check to remind me that this is temporary. We'll do everything in our power to give you the tools to be successful in whatever capacity you work in, but we'll also make sure that we have the safest environment for all of you to come back to, and maintain that. So with that, I just want to say we have a lot more to share. We will continue sharing out in ways that we feel would make sense for you to digest. Wishing you have an amazing rest of your summer. I wish I could wave a wand and say, let your anxiety be gone. I would just ask for you to do everything that you can to get your mindset in a place that allows you to visualize at least what schools could look like, what your classroom could look like, visualize what it would be like to have all of the PPE requirements and protocols in place, so that your mind can start to go there. I think that's an important part of this. So in close, I'll just say thank you. There's no better place to be than in the Pittsford Central School District. I want to thank our steering committee and everyone that participated in our 2-day workshop. Look forward to continuing to evolve our plans into something that can make us as safe and as productive as possible, and know that you have a voice in that. And tonight is one of those voices. So thank you.